Think about what a photograph proves. Not in the abstract. Specifically, think about what a photograph actually establishes when you look at it carefully and honestly as a piece of evidence rather than as a memory or a keepsake. A photograph proves that a camera was pointed at something and a shutter was opened and closed. It proves that light existed and was arranged in a specific way at a specific moment. It proves that whatever is in the frame was there, in some form, at the moment of capture. That is what a photograph proves. Everything else, the story around it, the explanation for it, the identity of the people in it, is interpretation, is inference, is the story that the person looking at the photograph has brought with them to the looking. There is a photograph in a medical journal. The journal is called the Journal of Military and Emergency Medicine. It is a peer-reviewed publication, not widely read outside the relevant professional circles, the kind of thing that sits in hospital break rooms and university libraries, and is subscribed to by the sort of people who believe, correctly, that the medicine practiced in the most extreme field conditions contains lessons that transfer every other environment. The photograph is in a case study. The case study documents a battlefield intervention that took place in Kunar Province, Afghanistan, in the spring of 2016. The author, a military surgeon named Major Dr. William Roark, describes arriving at a casualty collection point to find 4 soldiers alive who should not, by the available evidence at the scene, have been alive. He describes the interventions that were performed before his arrival. He describes them in detail because the detail is remarkable. The technique, the sequencing, the economy of materials used, the specific clinical decisions that were made in conditions that offered almost no margin for error. He documents everything with the precision of a man who understands that what he is looking at is exceptional, and that exceptional things should be in the literature. He could not identify the medic who performed the interventions. Before this story breaks your heart and rebuilds it again, please subscribe to this channel, ring that bell, and drop a comment below telling me which town or city you're listening from tonight. I read every single one. By the time he arrived, she was gone, moved to another position, the way field medics move, constantly, to wherever the work is. The soldiers she saved told him what they could, which was not much. A woman, dark hair, fast. The kind of fast that is not hurrying, but is the opposite of hurrying, which is the speed that comes from complete certainty about the next step before the current step is finished. He published the case study with one photograph. The photograph is of the hands. He took it because the hands were the evidence. The specific interventions were visible in what the hands had done to the wounds, and he wanted to document the technique before the medevac disturbed the scene. He did not think, taking the photograph, about who might recognize those hands. He published it because the technique deserved to be in the literature. He did not think about the literature ending up in a break room in Asheville, North Carolina. He did not think about a first-year nurse picking it up on a Tuesday night in March, because she reads everything, because she is the kind of person who has always read everything, who reads menus and instruction manuals and the backs of cereal boxes with the same attention she gives to the things she is supposed to read, because information is information, and you never know which piece of it is going to matter. He did not think about her looking up from the page. He did not think about what she would see when she looked up, across a break room partition, at a woman in navy scrubs updating a chart at the nurse's station. A photograph proves very little. The right person, looking at the right detail in the right moment, can prove everything. The hospital is called Mercy Cross Medical Center. It sits on the eastern edge of Asheville, North Carolina, in the bowl of the Blue Ridge Mountains, a mid-sized regional hospital serving a mid-sized mountain city, and the surrounding territory of western North Carolina. The small towns in the hollows, the retirement communities on the ridgelines, the farming valleys, and the tourist areas, and the places that are far enough from anywhere that a drive to the hospital is a 45-minute commitment on a good day and a significant ordeal on a day when the mountain roads have ice on them, which in March is still entirely possible and in January is guaranteed. The surgical recovery ward occupies the 3rd floor, 14 beds. A nurse is stationed at the center of a horseshoe corridor. Patient rooms on both sides, a break room and supply rooms at the ends. It is not a glamorous ward. Surgical recovery rarely is. The work is the long, careful work that comes after the drama, the monitoring, the medication management, the wound checks, the patient conversations that happen at 3 a.m., when fear is louder than pain, and what a patient needs is not a clinical intervention, but a person who will stay in the room. Nora Ellison has worked nights on this ward for 4 years. She is, by every available measure, exactly what she appears to be. This is the most precise and deliberate thing she has ever done. She starts her shift at 7 p.m. She has already run 5 miles. She has already showered and eaten something. She cannot always remember what, the way people cannot remember the details of a routine that has become so integrated into the day that it no longer requires conscious attention. She has fed the cat. She has checked, as she does every morning, that the succulent in the kitchen window has enough light, which in March in the Blue Ridge means tilting the pot slightly toward the glass to catch the low-angle sun. She drives to Mercy Cross in the 7-year-old Subaru that she bought because it handles mountain roads in any weather, and because it is the most common car in Asheville. She parks in the staff lot. She badges through the staff entrance. She takes the stairs to the 3rd floor, not the elevator, not because she has anything against elevators, but because the stairs are one of the ways she keeps her body at the level of readiness that she is not entirely sure she still needs, but is not willing to stop maintaining. The ward at 7 p.m. is in the process of handover. The day shift nurse, a man named Gerald, who has been at Mercy Cross for 19 years and who Nora trusts completely, which is a category containing fewer people than most people's categories contain, gives her the full picture. 14 patients. 3 in the first 24 hours post-op, requiring the most frequent monitoring. 4 in the 48 to 72-hour window, progressing normally. 7 in later stages of recovery, most of them scheduled for discharge within the next 2 days. Gerald runs through each one with the specific thoroughness of a man who understands that the night shift will be doing his patients a favor, and he would like them to have every advantage. He saves Mr. Aldridge for last, which is a habit he has developed, because Mr. Aldridge is the patient who requires the most context. He's been awake, Gerald says. When is he not? Nora says. He asked about you. Said to tell you he found something worth discussing. What is it? He wouldn't tell me. He said it was a night shift conversation. Nora almost smiles. Almost smiling is the closest most people get to a real smile from Nora. The almost smile is entirely genuine. It is not a professional performance of warmth. It is the actual thing, restrained not out of coldness, but out of the specific economy of expression that belongs to a person who has learned to keep most of what they feel in the part of themselves that does not show. The people on the ward who know her well, Gerald, and the charge nurse Carmen, and 2 or 3 of the night shift nurses she has worked alongside for years, have learned to read the almost smile. It means, I am genuinely glad about this thing. It means, I like this person. It means, this is real. She takes the ward. The first 3 hours of the shift are the ordinary catalog of a Tuesday night in surgical recovery. Room 301, a 52-year-old woman, 44 hours post-op from a laparoscopic cholecystectomy, doing well. Her only complaint a nausea that is the specific nausea of anesthesia exiting the system rather than anything surgical. Nora manages it. She talks to the woman for 8 minutes, not about the surgery, about Asheville, about the woman's daughter who has apparently recently moved to the city and is, according to her mother, dating someone unsuitable. Nora listens. This is one of the things she has learned to do that she was not, 7 years ago, particularly good at. Listening to things that are not the immediate medical situation. Being present for the whole person, and not only the wound. It took her a long time. She is glad she learned it. Room 304. A 37-year-old man, 18 hours post-op from a knee reconstruction, in more pain than he expected, which is very common and which Nora addresses both with the appropriate medication adjustment and with the specific information that tends to help people in unexpected pain. It is not a sign that something went wrong. The body's pain response after this kind of surgery is not proportional to the severity of the damage. It is proportional to the proximity of the surgery to the joint, which is a very sensitive structure, and the pain will diminish significantly in the next 24 hours and dramatically in the next 48. He says, "How do you know so much about this kind of pain?" She says, "I've been a nurse for a long time." This is true. It is not the complete truth. The complete truth is that she knows about this kind of pain because she has managed it in conditions where there was no medication to adjust and no hospital room to conduct the conversation in, and she has watched men endure it who did not have the option of the information she is giving him now, and she has always thought that the information helps as much as the medication, which is why she gives it every time, which is why she is, by the consistent testimony of her patients on their discharge surveys, the nurse they remember. Room 309, Mr. Aldridge. He is awake. He is always awake when she arrives. She has wondered, over 3 nights, whether he sleeps at all, or whether he sleeps in the specific way that certain people sleep, in short intervals, eyes closed, but not fully under, the resting body of someone whose mind has never fully agreed to stop watching. Gerald said you found something worth discussing, Nora says. I did, Mr. Aldridge says. He is sitting up. He does this despite the hip replacement, despite the specific discomfort that sitting up at 81 with a new hip involves, because he is a man who considers lying down to be a concession he makes only to sleep and not to conversation. I had my granddaughter bring me the crossword book. Not the book, a specific book, the one with the cryptic crosswords. And there's a clue, he says, 7 letters. The clue is, she tends the wound that the world forgot it made. 7 letters. He looks at her. I've been working on it for 4 hours. I can't get it. I thought you might know it. Nora sits in the chair at the side of his bed, the chair that is there for visitors who do not come at 3 a.m., who come in the day, and which has become, over 3 nights, tacitly hers. What letters do you have? She says. He shows her the book. They work on it for 20 minutes. The ward is quiet. The monitor in his room keeps its quiet arithmetic. Outside the window, the Blue Ridge sits in its darkness, enormous and unhurried. The answer they determine together is Sol Deer. Neither of them remarks on this. Patience Okafor arrived at Mercy Cross 8 months ago. She is 24 years old. She grew up in Charlotte, came to Asheville for nursing school at UNC Asheville, graduated in the top 8% of her class, and accepted the Mercy Cross offer, because the Mountain Hospital appealed her in a way she could not fully explain to her family, who had expected Charlotte or Chapel Hill, and who did not entirely understand what she meant when she said that she wanted to work somewhere that felt real. She means, though she has not yet found the full language for it, that she wants to work somewhere the work is not abstract, where the patients are not statistics, where the distance between a nurse and the actual life she is tending is as short as possible. She has found this at Mercy Cross. She has found, in particular, the night shift on surgical recovery, which she chose specifically because night shifts are where the real nursing happens, where there is no visiting family, no attending rounds, no bureaucratic overlay of the daytime hospital, and where a first-year nurse with the right instincts can learn faster than in any classroom. She has been watching Nora Ellison for 8 months. This is not sinister. It is professional. Patience watches everyone. It is how she learns, has always been how she learns, through observation before participation. And she watches Nora specifically, because Nora is the best nurse on the ward, possibly the best nurse she has ever watched work, and she wants to understand what makes her best. She has learned things. The way Nora reads a room before she enters it, a brief pause at the doorway, eyes moving, a full assessment of the patient's state completed before she takes a step inside. The way she talks to patients, never above them, never beside them, always at whatever level they are at, which sometimes means sitting on the edge of the bed, and sometimes means standing in the doorway, and sometimes means just being quiet. The way her hands work. This, above everything, is what Patience has been watching. The economy of it. The absence of wasted movement. The specific quality of a person who has done something so many times that the skill has left the conscious mind and lives only in the body. She picked up the journal because it was on the table. She reads everything. She always has. It is not a discipline. It is a compulsion. Words on a page draw her attention the way a sound draws certain people's attention, automatically, before the decision to pay attention. The case study drew her in, because the case study described something extraordinary. 4 soldiers alive from wounds that should have been fatal. The interventions performed without equipment, without adequate blood product, without a sterile field, without the infrastructure that medicine generally considers the minimum requirements for survival. She read the clinical description carefully, because it was the kind of description that teaches you something. And she found that she was reading it and simultaneously building the image in her mind of what it would have looked like, what the hands doing it would have looked like. Then she looked up. Then she looked at the photograph. Then she looked through the break room partition at the nurse's station, where Nora Ellison was updating a chart. She sat with this for a long time. She is not an impulsive person. She does not act on incomplete information. She does not confuse resemblance with identity or coincidence with fact. She sat with the observation, turned it over, looked at it from several angles, and arrived at a conclusion that was not a certainty, but was significantly more than nothing. The hands in the photograph moved like Nora's hands. Not like a coincidence, like a signature. She closed the journal. She put it back on the table. She returned to the ward. She did not say anything. The moment Nora notices is at 10:47 p.m. She is at the nurse's station. She is reviewing the medication schedule for the next 4 hours, a routine task, the kind of task that requires enough attention to do properly, and not so much that it consumes all of her peripheral awareness, which is a level of attention she has maintained, without particularly deciding to. Since she was a 22-year-old corporal in a training exercise at Fort Benning and her sergeant told her that the soldier who lets their peripheral awareness go to zero is the soldier who does not see what is coming from the side. She sees Patience through the break room partition. Patience is sitting at the break room table with the journal open in front of her. She is not reading the journal. She is looking at Nora, specifically at Nora's hands. The look lasts approximately 3 seconds before Patience registers that Nora has noticed and redirects her gaze to the journal. 3 seconds is a long time to look at someone's hands. Nora continues updating the medication schedule. Her face does not change. Her hands do not change. The medication schedule continues to be updated with the same precision as always, the same clean handwriting, the same systematic movement through the chart. Inside, something she had not felt in 4 years arrives. It does not arrive dramatically. It does not crash or announce itself. It arrives the way the awareness of a changed environment always arrived in the field, quietly, completely, like a change in air pressure, like the moment before weather. She knew, when she chose a medical career as her cover, that this was the risk, that the skills were too specific. That the specific quality of her hands, if anyone who understood what they were looking at ever saw them, would be the thing that a false biography could not fully explain. She thought, 4 years ago, that the risk was acceptable, that the likelihood of encountering, in a mid-sized mountain hospital in North Carolina, someone who would know what combat medic hands looked like from the inside, was low enough to manage. She did not think about a medical journal. She did not think about a photograph of someone else's hands being the key. She keeps updating the schedule. She will deal with this. She knows how to deal with things. She will deal with this the way she deals with everything. By understanding it completely before she responds to it, by not moving until she knows where she is moving to, by giving the situation the full weight of her attention without letting that weight show on her face. Patience comes back to the ward 10 minutes later. She looks at Nora when she arrives at the station. Nora looks back. A completely ordinary exchange. Nothing passes between their faces. Everything passes between their faces. Oh, The hours between midnight and 4 a.m. on a surgical recovery ward have a texture that is unlike any other part of the hospital day. The day shift is the hospital performing itself for the world. The rounds, the visiting families, the bureaucratic architecture of the institution in full operation. The evening shift is the transition. The world withdrawing, the ward settling, the patients who have been engaged all day beginning to understand that the night is long and the fear that is manageable in daylight is not always manageable in the dark. And then there is the deep night, 2 a.m. 3 a.m. The ward reduced to its essentials, the patients, the monitors, the nurses, the work. No performance, no audience, just the thing itself. Nora has always loved this part of the day. She did not know, when she chose nights, that this was what was choosing. She told herself she chose nights because a day shift schedule would make her more visible, more social events, more colleagues to maintain relationships with, more opportunities for someone to ask the questions she could not answer. This was true. But the deeper truth is that she chose nights because the deep night is where she is most herself. Because the quality of attention that the deep night requires, the sustained, comprehensive, unsentimental attention to the actual state of the room, is the same quality of attention she has been maintaining since she was a corporal on her first deployment, and it is the mode in which she is most comfortable and most capable, and she has spent 4 years being glad to have found a version of a life in which this is an asset rather than an anomaly. She checks every patient between 1 and 2 a.m., room by room, the full ward, the way she does it every night, standing in each doorway first for the visual assessment, then entering for the hands-on check, then documenting, then moving on. 14 rooms, 14 patients. Each one a specific human being with a specific surgical history, and a specific set of needs and fears and resources for managing with, and Nora knows all of them by name, and by case, and by the particular things that make them who they are, because this is how she was trained to see patients, and it is also, she has discovered, the right way to see them, which are sometimes different things and in this case, are the same thing. Patience is working the far side of the corridor, rooms 301 through 307 on her rotation tonight. Nora can hear her moving, the specific sound of Patience's sneakers on the floor, which is slightly different from the sound of the other nurse's shoes, which Nora registered automatically in her first week, working alongside her, and has tracked without thinking about it ever since. She knows where Patience is on the ward the way she used to know where the security element was on a position, peripherally, completely, without having to look. Patience has not asked any more questions. This is not reassuring. Patience not asking a question is not the same thing as Patience not having the question. A person who asks a question immediately is a person managing a small thing. A person who waits is a person who is managing a large thing carefully. Nora has been a person who manages large things carefully for long enough to recognize it in someone else. She arrives at room 309. Mr. Aldridge is awake. "You look like you're carrying something," he says. Nora is at his chart. She does not look up immediately. "I'm always carrying something," she says. "That's nursing." "That's not what I mean," he says, "and you know it." She looks up. Mr. Aldridge is 81 years old. He was in Korea when he was 19, a fact he mentioned on the first night, not as a boast, not as a piece of his identity that he needs her to acknowledge, but as information, the way he gives all information, as a straightforward account of what is true. He was at Heartbreak Ridge in 1951. He worked as a machinist for 40 years after he came back. He has 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and a wife who died in 2019 after 54 years of marriage, about whom he speaks with the specific quality of someone who has made their peace with the loss, but has not stopped feeling it, which he clearly considers the only honest position. He is the most perceptive person Nora has met in 4 years. She has thought about why. She has arrived at an answer that is probably right. He is perceptive because he is old enough to have no investment in being wrong about people. Young people are perceptive, but they are also invested in their perceptions. They want to be right, which means they sometimes choose the explanation that makes them right over the explanation that is accurate. Mr. Aldridge does not care about being right. He cares about what is actually happening. These are related but different orientations, and the second one produces a cleaner kind of seeing. I'm fine, she says. You're fine the way I was fine when they told me my wife's scan came back, he says. Which is to say you're managing something, and you've decided that's the same as fine. She puts the chart down. She sits in the chair. Mr. Aldridge, she says. Al, he says. He has been asking her to call him, Al, since the first night. She has not, because maintaining the small professional distances is one of the ways she maintains all the other distances. But tonight, at 3 in the morning, with a first-year nurse somewhere on the ward who has been looking at her hands with the specific quality of someone who has made a connection, the small professional distance feels like the wrong thing to hold on to, she says. He nods, as if she has agreed to something larger than the name. Tell me what Korea was like, she says. You never have. He is quiet for a moment, looking at her. You're asking me to tell you something large, he says, because you need to think about something large without thinking about it directly. She says nothing. That's all right, he says. That's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. He settles back. The monitor keeps its rhythm. Outside, the Blue Ridge is a darkness that the night makes absolute. Korea was cold, he says. That's the first thing. Before anything else, before the noise and the fear and the rest of it, just cold. The kind of cold that tells you the world doesn't care whether you're in it or not. He talks for 45 minutes. Nora listens. This the thing she has learned to do that she was not good at before. To receive someone else's large experience without immediately translating it into the language of what she knows, without mapping it onto her own geography. She listens to Mr. Aldridge talk about Korea, and she lets it be Korea. Lets it be 1951, lets it be him and not her. And in doing this, she finds that her own large thing becomes slightly more manageable, because it is sharing the room with another large thing that is not hers, and that has already been survived. At 4 a.m., Mr. Aldridge says, whatever you're managing, you've managed harder things. She says, you don't know that. He looks at her with the specific patience of a man who has been paying attention for 81 years. Yes, I do, he says. The riverbed in Kunar province was not where she was supposed to be. She was supposed to be at the casualty collection point, 300 meters north, which is where a 60 AW is supposed to be during a movement operation, which is where her sergeant had placed her when the patrol moved out. She was there. And then the radio crackled with something that was not the routine report, and she was moving before the radio finished crackling, which is not standard protocol, and which she did not ask permission, because asking permission would take 4 seconds, and 4 seconds, in the calculation she was running, was 4 seconds that people did not have. The riverbed was cold. March in Kunar province is still winter in the valleys, the snow off the peaks coming into the river, the air with a temperature that is not quite freezing, but that makes everything wet and slick and uncooperative. She went down the bank fast and hit the gravel at the bottom, and was already running the assessment as she ran toward the contact point. 4 casualties. She counted them before she reached them, because counting them was the first decision. 4 is a specific number. 4 has specific resource implications. 4 means you do not have the time to give any one of them everything they need. You have to give each of them exactly what they need and nothing more and move to the next one. The first was Specialist Torres, chest wound, entry through the upper right lobe, breathing compromised, conscious, but not reliably so. She sealed it. She did not have a commercial chest seal. She had not planned to be in a riverbed. She had planned to be at a casualty collection point. So she improvised with what she had, which is a technique that has a name now, that is in a medical journal now, that a first-year nurse in Asheville about on a Tuesday in March 7 years later. The second was Private Chen, lower extremity wound, femoral involvement, bleeding at a rate she could not manage without a tourniquet, which she had, thank God, always had, which was the one piece of equipment she had argued about carrying even when the weight became an issue, and her sergeant had eventually stopped arguing with her about it, because she had been right every time it mattered. The third and fourth she managed simultaneously, which is not something you can be taught how to do in a classroom. It is something that is possible only when the individual skills have been so completely integrated that they no longer require the part of the brain that makes decisions. They operate from somewhere lower, somewhere older, somewhere that is not reasoning, but is a different kind of intelligence that reasoning, when it is honest, recognizes as its equal. She did not think during any of this. Thinking would have been slower. She worked. Riverbed was cold. The water made a sound against the rocks that was completely indifferent to what was happening on the bank. She was aware of it the way she was aware of everything in her periphery, completely but without attention, the environment as information rather than experience. She would have the experience later. She would lie in her bunk and feel the cold of the water and the specific weight of the 20 minutes in the riverbed, and the way the light was going from blue to gold in the valley above. She would feel all of it later. Right now she was working. The military surgeon arrived with the medevac. He came down the bank and stopped. He stopped for approximately 2 seconds. She was already handing Torres off. She was giving the surgeon the report. Entry wound, upper right lobe, improvised seal GCS, improving BP, stabilizing in the specific shorthand of field medicine that conveys the minimum information in the minimum time, and the surgeon was receiving it and nodding and taking over, and she was moving to Chen. And the surgeon was looking at what she had heard, and she behind her, the quality of his silence, which was not the silence of someone who is processing medical information, but the silence of someone who is looking at something that has stopped them, and she did not have time to address that silence. She finished with Chen. She finished with all four. The medevac loaded them. The surgeon, before he left, came to her. He said, "What you just did, I've been doing this for 14 years. I've never seen that technique executed in the field. I want to document it." She said, "They need to get in the air." He said, "I know. Can I find you afterward?" She was already moving back toward her position. She said yes. He did not find her afterward. The operation moved faster than anticipated, and then the operation moved in a different direction entirely, and by the time he was looking for Corporal Nora Vasquez was somewhere else, doing something else, in the specific way that field medics are always somewhere else and always doing something else. He had the photograph, just the hands. He published it 7 years later and did not think about who would recognize it. She left the army 14 months after Kunar. The leaving was not a decision she made once. It was a decision she made hundreds of times, over the course of a year, in the specific way that large decisions are made, not in one moment but in the accumulation of moments, each one slightly heavier than the last, until the accumulation is too heavy to carry without changing direction. She was 27 when she left. She had 7 years in. She was, by any objective measure, very good at her job, which is to say she was very good at keeping people alive in conditions specifically designed to kill them, which is its own kind of skill set, which overlaps with other skill sets and also occupies territory that other skill sets do not reach. She understood, when she began building the new identity, that the challenge was not going to be the documents. The documents were manageable. She had people she trusted, and the people she trusted had other people they trusted, and the infrastructure for this kind of thing existed, as it has always existed, for the specific population of people who need it. The challenge was going to be the skills. The specific knowledge that lived in her hands, the way she read a room, the speed of her assessment. These things would not be invisible in a nursing environment. They would be visible, and they would require explanation. And the explanation would have to be something other than 7 years as a Ranger Battalion combat medic. She built the explanation. Hopkins for her RN, which took 4 years of genuine study and genuine effort, and produced a genuine degree that was entirely real. 2 years as a floor nurse in a Seattle hospital, which gave her the ward experience that a resume requires, and also gave her the opportunity to calibrate, to understand which of her skills were unremarkable in a nursing context, and which were too specific and needed to be performed less completely, held back just enough that they registered as very good rather than inexplicable. She was careful. She was so careful. She chose Asheville because it was the right size, not too small to be anonymous, not too large to disappear in. She chose nights because nights were where the real work was, because nights involved fewer people. She chose surgical recovery because it was close enough to what she knew to allow full competence and far enough from combat casualty care that no one would expect the specific skills. She was performing at a calibrated 60%. She had been performing at 60% for 4 years. She had been performing at 60%, and the ward still called her first when something went wrong. She had thought, sometimes, about what 100% would look like in a hospital environment. She had thought about it the way she thought about the riverbed, in the quiet, in the dark, with the specific mix of grief and gratitude that attaches to the things you have done that you can neither regret nor repeat. Patience finds her at 4:20 a.m. near the supply room. Nora hears the footsteps, Patience's footsteps. She knows them, and she knows that the conversation that has been coming since 10:47 p.m. is arriving now. She continues to what she is doing, retrieving an IV bag from the supply room shelf, checking the label, adding it to the cart. She does this completely, because completing the task in front of her is the thing she does when the larger thing is arriving, because the task is real and the competence with which she performs it is real, and these things do not stop being true, because something complicated is happening. Patience stops at the supply room doorway. "I'm sorry to catch you like this," Patience says. "What do you need?" Nora says. Not rude, the same professional tone as always, the open tone of a senior nurse to a junior nurse, genuinely receptive. Patience is quiet for a moment. She is choosing her words. Nora can hear the choosing. The pause has the specific quality of deliberation, not hesitation. These are different things. Hesitation is not knowing what you want to say. Deliberation is knowing exactly what you want to say and understanding the weight of it. "I was reading the journal that was on the break room table," Patience says. "The JME? It's been there a few days. One of the day shift nurses gets it. There's a case study," Patience says. "Field surgery, Kunar Province, 2016. 4 casualties." A pause. The interventions described in the case study, the chest seal improvisation especially. I had to read the clinical description 3 times, because I've never seen anything like it in any of our training material. Nora adds the IV bag to the cart. "It's a fairly obscure technique," she says. Military medicine developed a lot of improvisational approaches during the conflicts. Most of it hasn't made it into standard nursing curricula yet. "That makes sense," Patience says. "I looked it up after I read the study." Another pause, shorter. "There isn't much out there on the improvised version. The commercial version, yes. But the improvised one described in the case study, the specific material substitution, the application sequence, I couldn't find any other documentation of it being performed successfully in the field. The surgeon documented it because it was exceptional," Nora says. "That's why it's in the journal." "Yes," Patience says. A silence. Then Patience says, "I wanted to ask if you knew anything about the technique. 'Cause I've been watching how you work for 8 months, and I thought you might know about approaches that aren't in the standard training." Nora looks at her. This is the question wrapped in its professional innocence, and both of them know it, and the knowing of both of them is, in this moment, the most honest thing that has happened between them in 8 months of working on the same ward. Nora says, "What specifically are you interested in understanding?" Patience says, "How you would perform it, if you needed to, without the commercial seal." The supply room is lit by a single overhead fluorescent. The ward is quiet, beyond the doorway. From somewhere on the corridor comes the muffled sound of a monitor, a baseline reading, nothing alarming. Nora says, "I can explain the technique. It would be better with a training session, but I can walk you through the principle now if you have 5 minutes." Patience says, "I have 5 minutes." Nora says, "The key is the material substitution. You need something with occlusive properties, something that will seal against the skin without adhesive. In the field, the options depend entirely on what you have access to, which is why the improvisation has so many versions. The Asherman seal is the standard commercial approach. The improvised version, in the case study, used a combination of "she stops." She has been doing this, explaining the technique, with the complete, automatic competence of a person who has performed it, not with the competence of a nurse who has read about it. With the competence of someone who has done it, in a riverbed, in the cold, in 2016, on a soldier named Torres who is alive, because of the specific material substitution she is now beginning to describe to a first-year nurse in a supply room in Asheville, North Carolina. She stops. Patience is very still. The fluorescent light hums above them. Nora says, "I'll write up a summary. Training document. You can review it before our next shift." Patience says, "Okay." Neither of them says anything else. Nora finishes with the supply room and pushes the cart toward the corridor. Patience steps aside to let her pass. As Nora moves by, Patience says, very quietly, not looking at her, "I don't have any reason to tell anyone anything. Just so you know." Nora stops. She does not turn around. She says, "I appreciate you saying that." Then she continues down the corridor to room 301. The supply room conversation happens at 4:20 a.m. for the next hour and 40 minutes. Until the shift ends at 7, Nora works. She does not stop working. She does not go to the break room and sit down and process what has happened. Processing is something she will do later in the apartment, with the cat on the windowsill, and the coffee maker going, and the specific quiet of a morning that does not require her to be anything in particular. Right now she is on the ward, and there are 14 patients, and there are tasks that are hers and she will complete them. Room 302, a 68-year-old man, 2 days post-op from a bowel resection, whose pain management she reviews and adjusts. He is a former teacher, 8th grade history he mentions, as if he expects her to be impressed, which she is, because anyone who can teach 8th grade history for 30 years has survived something she considers genuinely difficult. She tells him this. He is surprised. He had not expected a nurse to have an opinion about teaching. He seems pleased. Room 306, a 29-year-old woman, appendectomy, first 24 hours, textbook recovery, no complications. She is awake because she cannot sleep in a hospital bed, a very common complaint, the specific discomfort of sleeping in a place that is not yours, and that is also, by design, surveilled. Nora sits with her for 9 minutes. They talk about Asheville. The woman is from out of town, visiting her mother. The appendix chose a dramatically inconvenient moment to fail. She is annoyed about this in the way that young people are annoyed by illness, not frightened, annoyed, as if the body has committed a scheduling error. Nora finds this charming. She does not say so. Room 311, a 44-year-old man, 3 days post-knee surgery, the same man she spoke with at the beginning of the shift. His pain has decreased significantly in the 12 hours since she last saw him. He looks like a different person. The specific transformation that happens when pain that was expected to be temporary actually behaves like it will be temporary. He tells her she was right. She says, "I usually am about pain." He says, "Why?" She says, "I've seen a lot of it." She moves on before he can ask the follow-up. At 5:40 a.m. she is back at the nurse's station doing her final documentation pass. The ward is settling to the end of the night shift, the quality of the quiet changing, the first suggestions of the day beginning to arrive, the sound of the kitchen cart being loaded somewhere on another floor, the very earliest gray of the March dawn beginning to show through the corridor windows. Patience is at the other end of the station, doing her own documentation. They work in parallel. The documentation is thorough. The ward is orderly. Nothing is wrong. Everything is right, in every measurable way, on this ward at 5:40 a.m. Nora takes a piece of paper from the supply drawer. She writes something on it. She folds it twice. She puts it in her pocket. She is not ready to do anything with it yet. She does not know exactly what she will do with it. She knows that there is a number she has not dialed in 4 years, and that the number is still active, and that the person on the other end of the number will know, the moment she calls, that something has changed. She knows that calling means something she is not sure she is ready for it to mean. She knows that not calling means something too. She puts the paper in her pocket. She finishes the documentation. She goes to check on Mr. Aldridge one last time before the shift ends. He is awake. She has come to expect this. In 3 nights, he has not been asleep when she checks on him before leaving, and she has stopped pretending to be surprised by it. She pushes the door open, and he is sitting up, and he looks at her with the eyes of someone who has been waiting. Shift's almost over, she says. I know, he says. Sit down just for a minute. She sits. The room is the same as it always is, monitored, warm. The blue ridge beginning to appear in the window as the sky lightens. The very first light falling on the highest peaks, the dark of the valleys still complete. It is one of the best views in the hospital, room 309, which is why Nora has always been glad that Mr. Aldridge is in it. He should have a good view. It is not a scientific opinion. It is a conviction. I've been thinking, he says, about a conversation I had with a young man at Heartbreak Ridge. She waits. He was 18, from Georgia. We had been on that ridge for a long time. You understand what I mean by a long time, I think. And he said to me, do you ever stop being who they made you? And I said, no. And he said, is that bad? And I thought about it for a while. And I said, it's the wrong question. The question is not whether you stop. The question is whether who they made you is someone you can live with, outside of the thing they made you for. Nora is very still. What did he say? She asks. He said he didn't know yet. Mr. Aldridge looks at his hands on the blanket. I told him, give it time. Give it time and give it something real to do. And the answer will come. Did it come? Nora says. For you. Yes, he says. Took about 10 years. But yes. He looks at her. I think you already know the answer. I think you've known it for a while. I think what you're doing tonight is deciding whether trust that you know it. Nora looks at him for a long time. You're a very perceptive man, Al, she says. I'm a very old man, he says. It's the same thing, eventually. She straightens his blanket. She checks the monitor. She looks at the window, the blue ridge going from dark to lit, the peaks catching the first light in sequence, north to south, the specific slow performance of a mountain morning that she has watched from this window for 3 nights, and that has not gotten smaller or less surprising. I'll see you tonight, she says. I know, he says. Get some sleep first. She leaves. The locker room at 6:50 a.m. is quiet. The night shift is filtering out. 3 other nurses before Nora, exchanging the small transactions of shift end, a joke, a complaint about documentation, someone's plan for breakfast. Nora moves through these transactions with the ease of someone who has been making them for 4 years. She is fluent in the social language of a nursing shift changeover the way she is fluent in the other languages she has had to learn, completely, through practice, until it no longer requires thought. She opens her locker. Her things are where they always are, her running jacket on the hook, her bag on the shelf, her keys hanging from the hook beside the jacket. She changes out of her scrubs with the same efficiency she brings to everything, not hurried, not slow, the pace of someone who has learned that the right pace for most things is steady. In the back of the locker, behind her bag, in a zip pocket she has never discussed with anyone, a phone. A different phone from the one in her jacket pocket. A phone she charged, last week, for the first time in 4 years, not because she intended to use it, but because she has always believed that the things you might need should be maintained, and she has never been able to make herself stop believing this. The paper in her pocket. She takes it out, unfolds it, reads what she wrote, the number, and one word underneath it, ready. She looks at the word for a long time. She thinks about patience in the corridor, saying, I don't have any reason to tell anyone anything. She thinks about what this means. Patience is not the danger. Patience never was the danger. The danger was always the photograph, which is already published, which is already in the literature, which can be found by anyone who knows what to look for and is looking. Patience found it by accident. Someone with a reason to look would find it with intention. And the person who published it, the surgeon, is not malicious. He is simply a doctor who documented something extraordinary, and the documentation is real, and the real is out there in the world in a way that cannot be undone. She can stay. She can stay and make the call she has not made in 4 years. And the call will produce people, and the people will produce a conversation, and the conversation will determine whether Nora Ellison in Asheville, North Carolina, is something that can be maintained or something that has to change. She does not know from where she is standing which of those it is. She knows that not making the call means the decision is made by default, and she has always preferred active decisions to passive ones. She picks up the phone in the back of the locker. She dials the number from the paper. It rings twice. A voice she knows answers. Not a greeting, just the open line. Nora says, "It's Vasquez." She has not said this name in 4 years. It fits differently than it did, not badly, not like a wrong size, but like a garment you have not worn for a season that still knows your body. There's a situation I need you to understand. It's not a threat. I need you to verify that and confirm how the picture looks from your end. Then I'm going to tell you what I've decided. A pause on the other end. Then, go ahead. She talks for 8 minutes. She gives the full picture in the specific shorthand of a person reporting to someone who knows the vocabulary, the journal, the photograph, the first-year nurse, the supply room conversation. She does not editorialize. She does not speculate. She gives the facts in the order they occurred, and she waits. The voice on the other end is quiet for a moment. Then, "The publication is a problem we should have caught. We didn't catch it. That's on our end, not yours." The nurse, she sounds contained. "She is," Nora says. "She's not the issue. What do you need from us?" Nora looks at the locker door, at her jacket on the hook, at the keys. "Nothing," she says. "I need you to know where I am and what's happened. I need the situation on record. I'm not going anywhere." Another pause. "You're sure?" "I'm a nurse on a surgical recovery ward in Asheville," Nora says. "I've been doing this for 4 years. I'm good at it. My patients know my name. The ward calls me first when something goes wrong. I'm not going anywhere." The voice says, "Understood." She puts the phone back in the zip pocket. She closes the locker. She puts on her jacket. She picks up her keys. She takes the stairs. The day shift changeover is underway when Nora comes out of the stairwell. The ward is doing the specific transformation of 7 a.m. The day nurses arriving with their coffee and their day shift energy. The night nurses completing their handovers with the specific exhaustion and completion of a shift that is done. The attending will be on rounds in 40 minutes. The breakfast carts are already moving. She gives her handover to Gerald. She gives it the way she always does. Complete, precise, patient by patient. Every note, every adjustment, and every observation that will be useful to the day shift. She gives Gerald Mr. Aldridge's status with particular attention. Pain well managed, sleep finally improving, the conversation about the crossword book ongoing and beneficial. Gerald nods. He has seen over 4 years that Nora's night shift patients do better than average. He has not asked why. She has always appreciated a man who accepts good results without demanding explanations for them. She is almost at the exit when she sees patients coming in. The timing is exact. Nora going out, patients arriving. The corridor between them. They stop at the same moment. The kind of stop that is mutual and simultaneous and slightly awkward in the way of two people who have had a significant exchange and are now navigating what comes after it. Nora says, "I left something in your locker." Training document. The chest seal technique, the full protocol with the material substitution options and the application sequence. Patience says, "Okay. Thank you." Pause. Patience says it's a good technique. "It is," Nora says. "It works." Another pause. Then Patience says, "I looked it up. The case study." After our conversation, I looked at the date of the intervention, March 2016. I looked at how old the medic would have had to have had enough experience to perform it that way. She is looking at Nora very directly, not accusingly. Not with any emotion that Nora can name except the specific quality of someone who is saying what they have decided to say. She would have had to start young, Patience says, To be that good at 27, Nora says. Some people do. Patience nods. She goes to her locker. Nora goes to the exit. The morning is cold and the Blue Ridge is visible above the hospital roofline, and the French Broad River Trail is 45 minutes away, and Nora has the specific quality of someone who has set something down that she has been carrying for a long time, not put it away. Set it down, which is different, which is the acknowledgement that it is real and hers and will be there when she comes back to it, which is not the same as carrying it every moment. She is, still, both things. She will always be both things. She is starting to understand that this is not a problem. It is an answer. On the trail she runs. The French Broad River is to her left, moving fast in March, the snowmelt coming down from the high country, the river doing the specific energetic work of early spring. She runs the full 5 miles. Same route, same pace, the pace that her body knows. She thinks about patience. She thinks about the specific courage it took to say what Patience said in that corridor. I don't have any reason to tell anyone anything. Not 'cause the statement was large, it was quiet, it was said as if it were the most natural thing, but because Patience said it before she knew how Nora would receive it, which is the definition of an act of trust. You do not know if trust will be honored until after you offer it. Patience offered it before she had any reason to know it would be safe to do so. This is a quality Nora recognizes. She has always trusted people who move first on trust. Not naively, she has also trusted people who moved first on trust and been wrong, and she carries the weight of those instances in the specific way that people carry the instances of trust that did not hold, which is carefully, in the part of the body where the careful things are kept. But the general principle has not changed. People who trust first are, in her experience, the people who are worth trusting in return. She thinks about Mr. Aldridge and the young man from Georgia at Heartbreak Ridge. She thinks about the question, do you ever stop being who they made you? The answer, which she has known for a long time and is only now willing to hold fully, is no. You do not stop. The 68W hands are still her hands. The assessment speed is still her speed. The peripheral awareness, the pace of the run, the way she reads a room before she enters it, all of it is still there. All of it is still hers. All of it is part of what makes her good at the thing she chose. The question Mr. Aldridge posed, through the story of the young man from Georgia, was not whether to stop. It was whether who they made you is someone you can live with, outside of the thing they made you for. She has been living with it for 4 years, in a surgical recovery ward, in Asheville. The answer is yes, not easily. Not without the 5-mile run at dawn, and the coffee that is always black, and the succulent on the windowsill and the cat and the library books returned on time. Not without the specific structure of a deliberate life. But yes, yes. She runs the last mile at a different pace. Not faster, not slower, more present. The difference is interior, the sense of the body being inhabited rather than managed, of running as an experience rather than a requirement. She notices the light on the river. She notices the sound the water makes against the particular rock formation at the bend near the 3-mile mark. She has run past this rock 300 times, and she has not, she realizes, ever really heard it before. She hears it now. She runs the last mile home and goes inside and feeds the cat and makes the coffee and stands at the kitchen window while it brews, looking at the Blue Ridge through the glass. The mountains are fully lit now, the mist burning off the lower elevations. The upper peaks clear and immense and entirely indifferent to the specific life being lived in the apartment below them. She pours the coffee. She takes it to the kitchen table. On the shelf behind the books, the photograph, face down. She looks at it from across the room. She has not touched it in 4 years. It is the only photograph in the apartment, and it has been face down since she put it there, which was a decision she made on the day she moved in, on the reasoning that photographs on display are photographs that can be seen and asked about, and she could not afford to be asked about this particular photograph. She crosses to the shelf. She picks up the photograph. She holds it in both hands. She turns it over. The photograph is of 5 people. They are in desert gear. They are squinting against the sun. They are not posing. Someone caught them between something and something else, in the specific informal way of people who are not thinking about being photographed. They are all grinning. 4 of them, she knows, survived the wars. She does not know, with certainty, about the 5th, and this is the weight she carries in the careful part of herself. And it is real, and she does not pretend it is not real. She looks at the photograph for a long time, then she props it against the books, face up, and goes to drink her coffee. It is the first time in 4 years that there is a photograph on display in her apartment. It is the right one. She sleeps for 6 hours. She wakes at 2 p.m. The cat is on the bed, which is against the rules and always has been, and has never once worked as a policy. The apartment is the apartment. The books, the succulent, the photograph propped against the shelf, the blue ridge outside the window. She gets up. She stretches. She makes tea, a specific black tea she has been ordering since she was in Seattle, because there are a small number of things she has allowed herself to keep from before, and this is one of them. She thinks about the evening shift. Mr. Aldridge will be awake. They will talk. She will ask about the young man from Georgia, what happened to him, whether he found the answer. She suspects Mr. Aldridge has kept track. He is the kind of man who keeps track. She thinks about patience. The training document she left in the locker is complete and precise and teaches the full technique, not a simplified version, not a clinical approximation. The full technique, the way it works, the way she performed it in a riverbed in Kunar province in 2016, and the way it could be performed in a hospital corridor or a field or an ambulance or anywhere else that a nurse might one day find herself in a situation for which the standard training is insufficient. She is going to keep teaching her, not because it is safe or because it is strategic. Because patience is the kind of nurse who will use the knowledge the right way, who already has the specific quality of attention that makes the difference between someone who has a technique and someone who can deploy it under pressure. Because the knowledge deserves to be passed forward. Because there are patients, somewhere in the future, in situations that no training module will have described, who will be alive, because Patience Okafor learned, on a night shift in Asheville, from a nurse whose hands remembered something that a photograph could not fully explain. She drinks the tea. She does not check the news. She does not call anyone. She sits at the kitchen table in the quiet of the afternoon, and she is simply here, in the apartment in Asheville, in the life she has spent 4 years building to be real, which is hers, which she is not leaving. At 5:30, she gets ready for work. She puts on her scrubs. She picks up her keys. She goes to the door. She stops. She goes back to the shelf. She looks at the photograph, the 5 of them, the desert sun, the grinning. She touches the edge of the frame with one finger, just a touch. Then she goes. If you love this type of intense nurse-taking action tales, hit that like button. Share the video with your fellow thrill seekers, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so you never miss a new story.